The conversation you are about to hear was recorded in 2020 during the height of the global pandemic. And now, Global Comedy Studios presents, Is This a Bad Time to Talk?
Okay, this is the real thing. I am calling my friend Jon Glaser. I mean, storied career this guy has had. The Conan Show, his own show Delocated, Neon, Werewolf, Gear. Jon Glaser loves Gear. The list is too long, but I've known him since Improv Olympic when we were on house teams together. Hello?
Yeah.
Jon Glaser?
Yeah.
Hey, this is Ali. Is this a bad time to talk?
No.
Thank you for doing this, AKA I'm here to listen. So this is just me doing this phone call podcast, calling old friends via this old handheld phone using an app called Tape-A-Call that I got on the App Store. Oh, by the way, are you cool with this phone call being recorded?
Yeah, sure.
I have to disclose that because you can't record people without letting them know.
Right.
And it may be posted if I figure out how to do that. Are you also cool with this podcast potentially being brought to you by Fresca? Now, I don't have a deal with Fresca, but I've been enjoying it throughout the pandemic.
Yeah. No problem for me as well.
And do you like Diet Dr. Pepper?
I don't know if I ever had Diet Dr. Pepper. I've had regular Dr. Pepper, which is quite delicious.
Oh, I love regular Dr. Pepper. But
really good.
I've been enjoying Goya lentils. I've been enjoying shelled pistachios by Wonderful. Are there items that you've been digging during the pandemic?
We've been drinking a lot of seltzer. You know, we have one of those seltzer makers, but, you know, we have to get the CO2 cartridges from the store, so we haven't been able to get those. So we've been getting a fair amount of Perrier, just plain, and then some of the grapefruit-flavored LaCroix, and then some Topo, I think it's Topo Chico. That's some
nice
seltzer. Yeah.
Now, I'm in New York City.
Had some of the Topo Chico lime. That was really good.
God, I was ahead of the game when I was like, add lime to everything. To me, lime it's up there. It's up there in terms of citrus. I'm in New York City right now at an undisclosed location for both our safety. But where am I finding you right now? Where are you talking to me from?
I'm in New York City.
Hello? Oh my God!
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. When I did this with Fred Weller and Michael Shannon, it cut out like at 15 minutes because it's an app. You do pay for the app, but like I might have to call you back a few times. But then I'll just figure out how to cut it together. But I didn't want to let perfect get in the way of good because you know in the DC world before Corona, I don't know if I would have called you to bother you to do a podcast and come over to Simple Studios and I'll get some Coke and bottles on ice and some Ben and Jerry's and we'll do a podcast. You know, I would have let perfect get in the way of good, but in the AC after Corona world, I'm like, will you talk to me on the phone for a little bit?
I was thinking about you recently because you're a very, you're an idea man. You know, this is what it was. Can't remember who I was talking to. Maybe, I don't know if golf came up. That's what it was. That's exactly what we were actually staying in New Jersey for 3 weeks at a friend's house. They went to Vermont to his parents, and they offered up their place to us, and we said, sure. You know, I was actually at first, I'm like, I don't know, let's just stay home, be with our stuff. My wife was really pushing to like, let's just get out of here for a few weeks. You know, it's about to get super nutty in New York. And it was great. It was nice to have a little extra space and be out of the city and not as many people around. And one thing I did when we were out there is I went for a run to a nearby town where some friends lived. And it was really nice to, obviously just go out and get the exercise, but also go run and see people in person, from the social distance appropriate length amount of feet. But one of my friends who lives out there, she's lived out there for a long time. she set up a little chipping net. So they just go in their backyard and they chip into this net. And I thought that was a great idea, and that made me think of the idea that you had as a joke, but I thought that would be great. What was the thing? Like you had like a semi-trailer, and just a putting green. You would drive around town, and people could just jump on the back of this thing and go putt for a little bit. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was called Gambler's Green, and it was basically a double-wide trailer, and it traveled around New York City, and it was high-stakes putting, basically a hole on either side, and you basically, depending on how much money you had, the putts were either $100 or $1,000 each between two people. Now, if both of you sink the putt, then the bet is doubled and you do it again. It's winner take all. And when someone loses, it's whatever the pot is. So, like, say two guys are putting and they're, $1,000 putters, right? So they're each putting $1,000 in. They both hit it. Now it's $2,000. Then it's $4,000. Then it's $8,000, and it just keeps going up. Gambler's Green was a blast. I mean, to get a double-wide trailer going around New York City, people in tuxedos, cocktail parties, watching people putt, high-stakes putting for money, it was fun. It was fun.
I want to see the list of ideas you've come up with during this whole thing, because I know there's a bunch. Yeah, well, one of them was this, let's call friends, because I'm going nuts. I'm like, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed, people and making stuff. And, you need, I don't know, I like to talk to people. I like to listen to people. And I remember when I was a kid, just how much it meant to be able to talk to someone on the phone and, and what it meant to like listen to Larry King at night, on my clock radio. So. Well, I've been doing not a lot, but more FaceTiming than I usually do with friends. Obviously we all have the bulk of my conversations are text. And it's so dumb. When we have phones, no one talks on the phone, or people don't even talk on the phone, and you just text with each other. And now it's at least, I've been doing a few FaceTimes. Like I've been playing backgammon on an app with friends on my phone, and I've been just asking people, like, let's FaceTime while we do it, so it at least feels like we're together. We can be face to face while we're playing, and it's that's definitely been a big help.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize just seeing someone, and the connection that is. I mean, it's not the same thing as being with them, but it's something. But for this, I just wanted to get back to that time of, innocence of where you're just calling somebody on a phone. And like I said, the phone I use for this is an old-time handheld phone.
You definitely need to send me a photo of the setup.
I will. It's just basically I plug it into my iPhone. I got this tape-a-call app, and I record it, and then now I got to figure out how to, post it or what to do with it. But I was like, let's just talk to people first, and then you can figure it out. Because I've had such great conversations that it was just like, even if it never gets posted, hey, at least I talked to a friend on a rainy afternoon. I mean, right now it's May 1st, 2020, 1:40 p.m. If you got nothing else out of this, John, you got the time and date.
I lost you there for a second.
I said it's May 1st, 2020, right? And it's around 1:40 p.m. in the afternoon. And if nothing else, you got the time and date out of this, Remember when you used to call up and say, what time is it?
I wonder if I'm going to try going to my daughter's room and go in there.
You're just cutting it in and out? Yeah. I'll talk you through it.
That could be me. Let's see. She's doing her schoolwork right now. She's usually been doing it in the kitchen. There's a little nook where she can sit. Now I will go. I've done a couple. Yeah, let me just. Right. Freddie, I'm going to go in your room again, okay? No. No loud yelling.
She was like, are you going to do loud yelling?
Well, I was lucky to get and maybe I'll even just crawl up in her bed, which will just be kind of cute and sweet. I did some, I've been doing this voice on this new cartoon that, was a job I got recently. And now that this is all going down, can't go to a recording studio. So we've been doing these table reads and scratch tracks. I did it, on Zoom. and I've been coming into her room to do it just because the internet's a little better in her room. But, some of them like screaming super loud, swearing, and I had to do a whale voice for one, and it was really, really funny and stupid. And she's just on the other side of the door hearing it all. And so she just asked me if I was going to be yelling and swearing.
Oh, man. That is sweet. That's so funny. The life we live and the stuff we do, and then the kids watching us do it. Like last night I was teaching a writing for SNL class on Zoom. Mm-hmm. And Ella and I are in a studio apartment. We're in my parents' studio, and she's just seeing me like talking sketch comedy while she's doing her homework. It's just like, it's ridiculous, but it was fun. I enjoyed doing it.
Well, I'm going to send you a photo so you can at least, you'll have a documentation of me and my daughter's room here. I'll have her bookshelf behind me.
Once we're done, I'll send you a pic of this because I'm so afraid to touch it because I'm afraid like it'll cut off and then I'll have to call back. But it doesn't matter. I'll call you back. So, look, you and I have known each other since 1990, 91-ish when you were, first time I became aware of you is when you were on Corky's Callback at I.O. And I was on the family and I was like, who is this guy? And you kind of just, I think we were right there about the same time. And
Chicago took notice when Glaser showed up.
Oh yeah. Chicago was like, who's this dude? Who is this guy? This guy's got the skills to pay the bills. This guy, who's Jon Glaser? What is he about? But it was like, you were on Corky's Callback, I was on the family, and those were like the two main house teams, and there were some other teams, but there was, whatever it was, it seemed like we kind of kept to each of our groups for the most part, with some kind of hanging out at Wrigley side and such. But, one of the things about this podcast or this phone call really is hearing people's bifurcation points, places along the way where someone told them about this class and they took it. There was this teacher that said to them, hey, you should really try to do this. And what brought you to Chicago when we crossed paths in, 90, 91? You have earliest memories of, doing this make-believe thing where you were like, oh, this is fun.
Absolutely. I kind of knew that I wanted to do comedy. When I was in high school, when I went to high school, I was all about sports. I wanted to play sports, and I did. I played soccer, basketball, and baseball. But I always liked doing comedy stuff, and it was my junior year. I'll try to make this quick. There's no
reason to make it quick.
My junior year of high school, I gave up baseball to try out for a play, and I got it, and that just changed everything. I knew I really loved doing that. Giving up baseball was a big deal because I really loved it. Of course, I entertained notions of I'm good enough to play college, which I'm sure I was not. Even low level college, whatever, Division III or whatever. But and so I really loved doing theater. I did a few plays. My mom, recognized that, and she got me tickets to see the Second City Touring Company when they came through Michigan. They played a theater in Ann Arbor. And I remember driving with my friend, this guy Joey Harashi, and he had an old Pinto. We drove out to Ann Arbor, like a 45-minute drive from where I grew up in Southfield, Michigan, and I was blown away by seeing this touring company show. It just looked so cool and like so much fun. And so in college, I checked out, there was a comedy show, a sketch show that they did, and I auditioned for it, and I was lucky enough to get it and did that all my years there and did a little stand-up and all that. But when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after college, for a living, I just, knew about Second City from seeing that touring company show. Never saw that. I don't think I really was ever even aware of SCTV at the time. But I ended up calling the theater. I took a year off of school, actually. This was big, where I took my senior year off to tour around the country with my friends who I did this sketch show with in college. And so we sort of did our own, I don't know if I ever told you the story. We did our own like grassroots just tour. You know, we all rented apartments in Ann Arbor. I ended up going to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And some of the guys had graduated, some of us took a year off, and we, you know, this is 89. This is, 89, 90. And, you know, there's no cell phones, there's no internet. We were just, you know, we bought this big book of financial aid and for colleges, and we called the financial aid departments and just said, what's the number of your entertainment division or whoever books comedy shows? And sometimes it was 3-4 phone calls before we finally got the right person. And so we booked our own tour that way all across the country. You know, nothing crazy. We did a couple big schools, mostly small schools. We rented a van and did these long drives, sometimes on the road for weeks. It was a really great experience as a young person. And I highly recommend to anyone out there who might be listening who's thinking of taking a year off of school before they go into the real world to do it. Although who knows what the real world's going to even look like from here on in as far as school and jobs with this whole virus. Anyway, don't think about that right now. You still hear me? You still there?
I'm here to listen. That's the other, it's AKA the podcast is this a bad time to talk? AKA I'm here to listen. So a couple, 2-3 times throughout the show, you may go, hey, are you there? And I'm going to go, I'm here to listen.
That's totally fine. I'm just making sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got the bad internet connection. I don't want to have
no worries.
A very long story and then, we got to do it again.
Right.
Which I'm happy to do. Anyway, so did that tour for a year. It was an incredible experience. Went back for my senior year, which was important to me. I remember telling my parents, I'm going to go back and finish school. So during my senior year of college, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I graduate. Am I really going to pursue acting? What am I doing? I really didn't know, even though I knew that's what I wanted to pursue. I didn't know how to do it, didn't know if I should move to New York, LA, but I knew about Second City. And so I remember calling the theater and, I'm sure just called the main number in the lobby and got someone on the phone and just said, do you ever do auditions for the show? And they said, no, but, we have a touring company you can audition for. And I said, how do I go about doing that? They said, well, do you have improv experience? And I said, no. And then they said, well, you really probably can't do it. And then they hung up. And then I just called back and pretended I was someone else. And I said, yeah, I do have improv experience. And I got a slot to audition. And so I took the train from Ann Arbor to Chicago. And I remember at the time, I had very little experience. I had no improv experience. All I had done were these sketch shows in college, a little bit of stand-up. So I didn't really have a resume. And that's another thing they told me. They just said, here's your appointment, bring a headshot and resume. I said, great. So, I had maybe 3 things to put on my resume. There was, these sketch shows, the stand-up, and that's not a very impressive looking resume. So to expand it and fill up this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I put all these bullet points under each thing, and a lot of it was, improv, an integral part of the rehearsal process, stand up, improv is part of, just doing it, blah, blah, blah. I try to make it look like I had this improv experience. And then for a headshot, I just, again, this is before the days of digital cameras and nice printers, and you just really quick and you plug it in and you print it and you're done. If you need to do it by yourself. This was buy a roll of film for the 35 millimeter camera that I had, take all the lamps, I had 2 roommates in college. We took all the lamps in our apartment, gathered them in one corner of the living room to get the best lighting possible. I was actually holding one of the lamps in my hand. If you were to look at this old headshot, and I feel like I have it in a box and storage somewhere, you can kind of, if you're not looking for it, you wouldn't notice, but if you're looking for it, you'd see that my one shoulder looks a little different because my arm is raised holding this lamp off frame. So I take this roll of film to some processing studio and do an overnight where they just give me the negatives. I choose what looks like the best headshot or, the best shot. They print it for me. I take that with me on my train ride from Ann Arbor to Chicago. where I stay with a friend who had graduated the year before and was living there. He was a dramaturg at the Goodman Theater. So he let me stay with him for this weekend that I'm there to audition. And it's very intimidating. It's very scary. I get to the theater. I'm wearing what for me was a nice outfit, which was these, I remember I had these kind of like mustard yellow jeans from the Gap and one of these light blue Gap denim shirts. And so I tucked the shirt in. I also had this really long, like army jacket, this long hoodie army jacket that went down to the knees. It was very similar to the jackets the guys wore in the movie Quadrophenia. I just love that jacket so much. I, to this day, wish I had saved it and kept it. So I get to the theater. You know, there's a handful of people, you know, milling about the lobby, people waiting to audition, and I'm just so intimidated. Everyone just looked like seasoned actors and comedians. I'm not 100% sure, but I am almost positive that one of the people sitting in the bar waiting was Patrick McCartney. You know, I just remembered like, ooh, this guy looks kind of tough and grizzled, and he looks like a serious actor. And I don't know if it was him for sure, but I think it was. Anyway, I go in for my audition. I'm pretty sure Dee Ryan was in my audition, and maybe even Michael Williams, if you remember that dude, DeWiggity. And so I don't know what I'm doing. I've never really done improv like this. I don't know if you went through this improv or this audition process, but, you know, you're in the main theater of Second City. You're on stage with 6 people or 5 other people, and the house is dark, so you can only hear people talking to you, but you can't see them. You don't know how many people are out there. It's extremely nerve-wracking and intimidating, and I'm just doing my best. And, you know, we go through these improv games, and then they line you up, and they're asking you questions. And I remember at the time, you know, so I had this headshot and I had this resume, and you know, the headshot's 8x10, the resume is 8.5x11, and I didn't even think to cut it down so it matched and staple them together. I just turned in these 2 separate pieces of paper, and I remember hearing a voice from this, you know, darkened crowd. Whose is this? They're not stapled together, different sizes? And I'm just mortified, and I remember just feeling like, oh, Jesus Christ, I just look like I look so green. I don't know what I'm doing. And I just kind of raise my hand. I'm like, that's mine. And I, you know, overall felt pretty good about the audition. You know, I thought I did well and got a few laughs and felt good about some of the moves that I've made from an improv standpoint, not knowing what I'm doing. You know, during the interview Q&A stuff, I felt like, oh, this is going well. I'm being funny. And whatever, I felt pretty good overall, even though I was mortified about that one moment where I'm being asked about the headshot and resume not stapled, not the same size. So I leave the theater, I go into the lobby, and I had all my stuff. I was pretty much going from the audition to the train station back to Ann Arbor. So I go in the lobby, I untuck my shirt, I put on this hat. I had this hat, this bike company called Chinelli. They make bike parts, and I had this hat at the time that said Chinelli on it that I thought was cool. And, you know, put on my big army jacket. I'm getting my little duffel bag. I'm amazed sometimes too. Like, there's certain memories that I have no recall. This one is vivid, you know, all the details. So I'm basically just, you know, getting my stuff together to leave. Some woman comes out from the theater, an older woman, who had just, you know, she was clearly one of the people that were in there auditioning people. And she says, hi, can I talk to you in my office for a minute? You obviously know who it is because you can hear her voice. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who this is, but I do know it's someone that was just in there auditioning people. And I'm just immediately freaking out. In my head, I'm like, who is this? Oh my God, what's happening? Why am I going into her office? What's about to happen? Am I going to be asked to join this theater? Am I going to have to drop out of college with 1 semester left? Like, I'm freaking out and trying to just play it super cool. Like, oh yeah, sure. So I leave all my stuff. I follow her in there, and, you know, she sits, you know, we sit down. She's couldn't be nicer, really disarming, totally put me at ease. You know, she's like, you're really funny. I really like your audition. You know, you definitely need some training. You know, stay in school. don't break your mother's heart, by dropping out of school. But, here's my card. Call me when you graduate. And it's Joyce Sloan, who at the time, wasn't as involved as a producer, but she was like the producer emeritus. But for people who don't know the history, she was, the main producer of that theater for years. A big, big, big shot in the Chicago comedy and theater community, and just an all-around great person. And, this is a life-changing moment for me. Absolutely, completely gave me direction, right in that moment. I was solidified. I'm like, I'm going to graduate and I'm moving to Chicago and taking classes here. I mean, I can't emphasize enough what a big moment that was. And so I still have that card, which I've for years been meaning to frame, but I still have it. And I remember, finishing the school year, of course, I went to Pizzeria Uno after that, got lunch. I was reading this Woody Allen book. I think it was Without Feathers, and just so sky high and just so excited. But, I didn't have a cell phone. I couldn't call my parents. I might have gotten on a payphone and said something, or maybe I waited till I got back. Finished school, work a summer job to make a little money, and went to Chicago in September, found an apartment, came back, packed all my stuff, went there, and I think moved there in early October and started my classes a week later. And it took me a couple months before I actually called her, because I remember thinking, she didn't literally mean call me. There's no way. She's just being very nice. And she was, like, in that moment, so encouraging, so supportive. But I remember thinking, fuck it, I'm going to call just in case. And I remember calling the lobby again, the main number on the card. And, hi, Second City. Hi, I'm calling for Joyce Sloan. Who's calling? Jon Glaser. Hold, please. So while I'm on hold, I'm just thinking, what am I doing? Why am I making this phone call? She's not going to remember me. And I'm expecting one of two things. I'm expecting either whoever picked up the phone to then pick the phone back up from hold and say, yeah, I'm sorry, can I take a message? Or if she got on the phone, I'm expecting, hi, who is this? Kind of some annoyed response. And it was, of course, knowing Joyce Sloan, the exact opposite. John, how are you? And then I'm totally startled. Hi, I don't know if you remember me. Yeah, I remember you, right? You were in school in Michigan. Like, she knew all the details, totally remembered. I don't think she was faking it. And I just said, yeah, I don't know if you remember. You gave me your card, and you said, call me when you graduate. And I graduated in June, and I just moved here, and I'm taking the classes. And she just said, well, that's great. Best of luck to you, and I hope it goes well. And that was it. There was no, come in and meet me, nothing. It was just good luck, and that was it. But the fact that she remembered and was super nice on the phone just blew me away. And then, of course, I got lucky to be hired a year and a half later and got to know her and meet her and told her that story. And then even what you were saying about, do I remember the first time doing this? I remember just started my classes there, of course, but I was just wanting to see what's out there. I remember going to see that place, Improv Institute. I remember going to see a show there. I remember vividly seeing Brian Stack, because he just stands out, first of all, physically, super tall with that red hair, and then just, of course, incredibly funny. I remember specifically Stack and Noah Gregoropoulos from that Improv Institute show. And then I went to see, I heard about Improv Olympics, so I went and saw some of those shows. And I remember actually seeing Rich Sohn and Rich Fulcher. I remember those guys from the show that I saw. Then I started, I don't know if I saw The Family. I don't know if I saw, it might not have been a weekend night. But I just was blown away. It just looked so fun. All the games they were playing and the scenes they were doing, I just really immediately loved the long form. And so that's what I was doing when I first moved there, was just taking classes at both Second City and Improv Olympic. And then, a short time later, I got lucky from doing the classes in Improv Olympic that Sharna put me up to sit in with one of the house teams, which was Corky's callback. And then I got to do it full time. And, it was just crazy to even think about how long ago that was. And how fortunate I was. And as you were saying, it took Chicago by storm. You know, people are like, who the fuck's this guy?
So wait a minute. Who is this sweet glass of water? It's 90. You show up there from Michigan in October of 90, you were saying?
October 91.
91 is when you show up.
That's when I moved there. Improv Olympic, maybe I started doing early. I don't know if I started doing Improv Olympic right away. I think I did. I feel like I was like, what else is out there that I can be doing, you know, besides just Second City, and, you know, trying to go see shows. And yeah, so October 91, moved to Chicago. Can't remember how soon after that I started IO.
Do you remember that touring company show that you drove to see when you were in high school? Do you remember who was in that show, or did you ever try to look up to be like, who was in that tour co?
I did. I don't remember, and I never looked it up. I don't remember the scenes I saw. I just remember generally thinking it was incredible. It was so funny. It just looked like so much fun. It completely resonated for me as something that I wanted to do. You know, it's one of those moments where you just recognize, I don't want to necessarily say your calling, but you certainly recognize it as something you want to do. And I've been always wanting to do, or just enjoying doing comedy things, you know, in middle school and high school. And it wasn't until I actually quit baseball to try it. Because I remember even in ninth grade summer camp, the summer before ninth grade, I did this. I'd been going to this summer camp, and the ninth graders who were the oldest kids at the camp, there was a village, you know, all the camp had different villages for each age group. And ninth grade was called specialty. And the reason they called it that is because you could actually have a specialized experience. You could, you know, sports, drama, arts and crafts. And I did sports, but then we did some, you know, all village play one night. And, you know, as goofy as you can imagine a camp talent show type thing would be. But I was doing the thing, and I thought I was, you know, trying to be really funny. And afterwards, the guy that, and this was at the beginning of the session of the summer, and the counselor that ran drama actually came up to me. He's like, "You are really funny. Would you consider doing the drama instead? I think you're really good." Like, he was actually really encouraging. And of course, in the moment, I'm like, no. But, you know, it was one of those things where I knew that I liked doing it, and having someone else say something was at least, you know, planting these seeds of maybe it is something to think about. And it was actually in high school before the junior year when I quit baseball to try a play. You know, they had this all school assembly where they showed the whole school got together to watch the school play that they were going to be doing, which was Grease. And that was also a thing that I thought, this just looks fun. I want to try it. And tried out for that play and stopped playing baseball. Never look back.
And do you remember the name of that guy at the camp?
I don't. I'm trying to think if I can. Oh, man.
And what was the name of your group in college, the sketch group you were with?
So the group at U of M, the officially sanctioned group, was called Comedy Company. Just the worst, most generic name. The Comedy Company. And then when my friends and I took a year off, we came up with a name called Just Kidding. Just terrible. Just terrible. But that was our name. Just Kidding. But it was, man, that was quite a year. It was just such a cool experience.
But to have amazing to have the wherewithal and the kind of drive and kind of to get together with people and get a van and call the financial aid department and booking your own tours. I mean, that's kind of amazing.
It was pretty cool. You know, it was two or three of the other guys that were the ones that spearheaded it, because they graduated and they were the ones that put it together. And then they asked me and a couple of the women that were in the show who were also undergrads if we wanted to do it with them. And so for me, it was, you know, I had to take a year off of school. I remember my dad was not very happy about it. My mom was they were both very supportive of what I wanted to do with these creative endeavors. But I had to kind of assure them that I wanted to come back and graduate, and that was important to me. So they were the ones that spearheaded it. You know, we had two of the guys were involved in just a strictly production capacity. You know, they did all that legwork, making all those calls. but we were all involved in it. There was the planning of it. Once we booked certain shows, then we had to deal with the logistics of, we drove across the country. We drove from Michigan to, I remember we did some shows at these, the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, schools like that we'd never heard of, and played these really cool towns and and shows. Sometimes for 10 people, sometimes for 50, sometimes for 3. They ran the gamut of big shows, small shows, good crowds, no crowds. But, it was another cool way to see the country. We drove, all the way through the state of Montana, through the Northwest. I remember my mom actually lived in Arizona at the time for a year because my sister ended up going to the University of Arizona for a couple of years, and my mom just decided to move out there to be closer to her. University of Arizona is down in Phoenix, or Tucson, I think, which is south, and my mom ended up living in Flagstaff for a year, which is north. And on the way back from one of our western trips, where we played some shows in California, we drove through Flagstaff. They dropped me off, and I spent Thanksgiving there with my mom, and then went and visited my sister and flew back to Michigan. And that was around Thanksgiving, and just stuff like that. It was just this really cool experience, and I'm sure I got a bunch of photos in a box and storage somewhere that I got to find from that trip. It was pretty awesome.
Who were some of the teachers you had when you were at Second City and IO that you remember, and acting teachers and things you maybe learned from them, or people who championed you?
Martin DeMont, I actually had for 2 classes, and I really, really liked him so much. He was a great teacher, a great person, very positive. I learned a lot from him about improv and, even just conversation and talking and listening. And who else did I have? I had, Joe Keefe I had. There was, Martin DeMont, Joe Keefe. There was 1 or 2 other teachers because it was 5 levels, and I had Martin twice. There was a guy, I cannot remember his name, and then another guy, and I should remember his name, and I can't. He was kind of tall, very talked like this a little bit. I'd probably know his name in a second if I heard it, and I just cannot think of it.
Gelman?
Yeah, I was going to say Gelman. What's his first name?
Michael Gelman.
I think that's exactly it, because I was going to say Brett Gelman, but I knew that was not right. But yeah, I think it was Michael Gelman. So those are my teachers, and maybe I had, what's that guy's name? He had a big white fluffy dog, played softball. Oh man, I can't remember if he was one of my instructors or not, but I had a pretty good experience going through the classes. I had fun overall, and Charnage was the only person that taught my IO classes. Yeah, crazy.
And who were on the stages when you got there? Who was in at that time? I think there was main stage, ETC, maybe Northwest.
Northwest
the tour
was
coach.
happening.
Yeah.
Northwest
who were the people
happening.
you saw?
Well, I remember when I got there, I think the main stage was it was Carell, Colbert, Paul Zanello, Sedaris, or Ruthie Rudnick and Fran Adams were on the stage. Jack Hoffman. Hold on 1 second.
Wow. I mean, that's like golden age of Second City.
It was incredible. When I got hired, Wazowski, Adsit, Ian Gomez, Jenna, Mia were on ETC doing some really incredible shows. Remember Aaron Rhodes, John Hildreth were at Northwest. Who else was out there in some of those shows? I remember when I finally got hired for Tourco, they would, of course, encourage you to go watch shows, encourage you to watch the improv sets. And I just loved it because I just thought, I can't believe I'm actually hired here. I can't believe I'm allowed to come in here for free whenever I want. And I would go a lot. And I remember just being mesmerized by Amy Sedaris, one of the, in my opinion, the funniest people ever, and just loved watching her improvise, loved watching her in these scenes, and Scott Allman was in the ETC, I think, at the time. So funny, and so many good people.
I mean, you went from like taking your first classes at Sex City to being hired in Tourco in a year and a half.
I think it was about a year and a half.
Wow.
I think I started touring in '93. That sounds about right. And see, I was doing the classes at I.O. and doing the classes at Second City. I actually ended up doing a play also before I got hired at a touring company. This theater. Do you remember the Mary Archie Theater? Did you ever hear of that place?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Small theater.
I saw you in that. The tutu. Yes.
It was the Arturo E.
Yes,
The Irresistible
I
Rise
saw
of
that.
Arturo E. A Bertolt Brecht play, and we did it in the Commedia dell'arte style. Man, that was a great experience too. Just getting to do that. There's a guy that I still keep in touch with. This guy named Dan Meyer, who's actually good friends with Mike Shannon, who you just talked to, and that's actually how I know Mike Shannon is through Dan. Great actor, great guy, and he was in this play. And that was an experience getting to do that. I just had a handful of very small parts, but just cool doing like this play at this cool little Chicago theater, and then I think I got the touring company job when I was doing that. I had to leave the play. Remember Rick Borelli? He did a little thing in that play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
a year and a half. Go ahead.
Wow. So you got into that tour. Were you at Greenco or Redco?
I was in Redco. It was me,
Redco.
Joe Dempsey, Jeff Rogers, Mark Dalbus, Rachel Dratch, and Jennifer Eslin.
And who was your director?
Group. Charlie Hartsock.
Right.
And then Michael Bro was our stage manager. And then we had, what's his name? We had a couple. Chad Kruger played piano for a little bit, and then we had another guy who played piano with us who ended up being one of the co-writers and wrote the music. Remember that musical Urinetown?
Yeah.
He was. Yeah. He did all the music for it. God, I can't believe I don't remember his name. With what was it? Craig Cotis, who was the other guy who I became friendly with because he was part of the Neo-Futurists in Chicago. They did that show Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind, which I thought was incredible. And then I remember meeting Greg out here in New York, and he ended up hiring a bunch on Conan, and an awesome guy and super talented, and he was also a Neo-Futurist, and they had that musical.
So you toured around for a bit, and then what was the first stage? Did you go right into main stage for Piñata?
Well, I didn't go right into it, but I from doing touring company, I understudied a little bit. I did a little understudying out at Northwest. Can't remember who. I think I understudied for Aaron, and then I understudied Adsit on ETC, and then I understudied Colbert on main stage, and that was just very fortuitous because he ended up getting that Exit 57 job. Remember that show with him and Danilo and Amy and Jody Lennon? Mm-hmm. And Mitch Rouse, I think, was in it. And he got that job. Like, that show happened almost, right after they opened the show. They hadn't been doing it very long. And so I was his understudy and basically just replaced him. They didn't have me come in temporarily and bring someone up from ETC. I just got to sort of step in, and he was very heavy in that show, and I got to do it for, I think, several months from what I recall. Like, it might have been, 4 months, 5 months. So I essentially became a part of that cast, even though it was still as an understudy, but it was fairly full time for a few months, I think. And then after that, they started doing that Old Wine, New Bottles show, And then I went back to touring and understudying, and I was understudying Wazowski. And then he ended up leaving the theater. And so I filled in for him for a little bit during that show. And then the next main stage show ended up being Pinata. And I remember meeting with Tom Giannis, who directed it. And, I think he directed the show that Colbert did. I can't remember for sure. But he was directing, and he just, met with me just to, I think, gauge how he felt about me being in the cast, because he, I think he was happy with the job I did. And I just got very, very lucky that I, skipped Northwest and ETC, although I would have been more than happy to do either or both of those stages. The ETC, I actually kind of wish I got to do a show back there, because it just seemed like such a fun place to get to do a show. You could be a little more experimental, although we obviously were more doing some weirder stuff with Pinata. But I kind of was, no complaints, of course, but it would have been fun to do a show at ETC and have more of the traditional trajectory. But I was very excited to just get to go right into that main stage after doing all that touring and understudying. It was very cool, and a great cast and a great show.
And Pinata is one of those shows that people talk about in terms of like changing the way Second City, used to do shows from, it's definitely a line in the sand, Pinata. And as it was happening, did you know, or feel like, yeah, this is different?
For sure. I mean, it was literally different. It was not the traditional format. And there was, we knew that some people weren't going to be happy about it. We heard about that. We heard both sides. Some people thought it great. Some people were not happy that we were breaking the form there. And, we were still obviously keeping the elements of the cabaret review style show. But we all knew we were trying something different. But I think it was a great cast. Most, if not all, the people came from that long form background, and if they didn't, they were game for it. I thought it was cool. It would have been fun to get to another show there that was a more traditional type review, but I was very, very lucky to get to do that one.
And that was you, McKay, Atsit, Rachel, Jenna. Who am I forgetting?
Allman.
Who?
Scott Allman.
Right. Scott Allman. Oh, Scott Allman. Wow. Secret weapon.
Yeah.
Allman. Oh, wow. What a cast. And when you were with them, was there a sense of like, wow, I'm running with wolves. Like everybody around me is very good at this, and good people too.
Oh yeah. At this point, I had seen everybody perform, whether it was at Second City or I.O. I vividly remember the first time I saw, or not the first time I saw, but the first time I performed with you guys, and specifically McKay. And it's McKay because I remember, we were doing that game, The Dream, and whoever was explaining their idea, they were talking about being at work and being at office and working on a computer. And I remember thinking at that time, oh, that's fun. I'm going to do something with that. And so they finish their story. They go sit down. We're doing the dream starts. There's a few scenes happening. It sort of gets to the point sequentially where it's about in the way where they were at work. And I'm just about to go on stage. I remember I was in I was in the left wings. I'm about to go on stage and I don't even remember the bit that I had. I was going to, probably some half-baked thing about how I might work with my computer, some shitty thing. And before I go on stage, McKay comes out from the right side first with some idea that was, typical McKay, 100 times better, funnier, more interesting, smarter. And it was a moment for me where I was like, holy shit, who the fuck is this dude? And it just blew me away. And then, of course, from being at I.O. and watching all you guys, just feeling like, wow, these guys are on a different level from everybody else. And so then to get to actually, do a show at Second City and start doing a show with all these people, it was so cool. And I got to understudy for Adsit at ETC. And I learned so much just from watching him on stage and off. And then to get to be in a show with him was just, I mean, with all those guys was pretty cool. Pretty great.
And so after Pinata, that was your one show, and then after that you moved on, right? You got the job writing for
Correct.
Dana Carvey, right?
The Dana Carvey job happened right at the end of Pinata, and just as the next review was starting rehearsals. I think I was a week in, so we had the whole cast, which was at the time McKay moved on to SNL back in the fall, and Dorff took his place. So everybody else was the same. Jenna, Rachel, Allman, and Adsel, and me and Dorff. And so we were maybe a week in to the rehearsal when I got the news that I got the writing job for Dana Carvey.
And what was the process like for that? Did you put together a packet? How did that come about?
It basically came about from, they were auditioning for the show probably in the fall. Because I remember that previous summer, this is 95, and that summer they were hiring a whole new cast at SNL. So I remember they had come through town, like Lorne Michaels, and they were watching all the Second City shows, and everyone's, all nervous about it because they knew about it. And I got, I was invited to audition. And so I auditioned for SNL as an actor, didn't get it. And then when the Dana Carvey show auditions came up, I remember Robert Smigel, who was obviously a longtime SNL writer, and he was the first head writer at Conan. He was the EP on Dana Carvey show. He knew Tom Giannis from Chicago. He actually got in touch with Tom and said, tell Glaser that I really liked his SNL audition. I guess Smigel, because he's friends with Lauren, he was able to get all the SNL audition tapes from the people that didn't get hired, and he watched them all. And he really liked my audition. And he told Giannis, tell Glaser to do that same stuff. Or, a couple of the same things. And so I thought that was obviously very cool, and I auditioned for the Dana Carvey show as an actor, and I didn't get it, but they reached out and said, we're not going to hire you as an actor, but do you have any interest in submitting as a writer? And I just felt like being a writer was never anything I ever considered doing, ever. And when this came up, I felt like, this just seemed cool enough that, and not cool enough, it seemed very cool to, that I couldn't say no. If it was some sitcom, I'm sure I would have said no. But this, I just felt like I have to at least try. So I remember going home. I think I had a really old Apple computer, or maybe it was my roommate's. I can't remember for sure, an old laptop. And, and I wasn't a writer. I didn't know what I was doing. So I just spent, a week or so just trying to think of sketch ideas. And I wrote up, I think, of 4 or 5 sketches and, did it how I thought it should be best. And just, I remember, and some of them I wrote some like handwritten notes on them that were sort of helping describe what someone think would look like, and just turned in these sketches. And then that might have been October, and then they actually flew me out. They got in touch and said, we like these sketches, we want to meet with you. So they flew me out to New York. I met with Smigel, Louis, Dino Dramatopoulos, and then this guy named Mike Stoyanov. And those were the 4. They were the first writers that were hired, meaning Dino and Mike, because Louis was the head writer, Robert was the EP. And it was just so intimidating because here's these guys that I didn't know them really who they were, but they were obviously these big shot comedy guys who I would obviously later realize who they were. And it was, I think that was just more, they wanted to just meet me to just make sure they got along with me as a person. That's half the interview process is they like your stuff. They just feel like make sure you're not a weirdo that they don't want to work with on a daily basis. And so that I think was November. I recall that being before Thanksgiving, and I didn't get hired. I didn't get the word until January after the new year. And at that point, I just had resigned myself to, I'm like, well, I guess I didn't get it because I thought I would have heard right away. So it was probably a couple of months, and it was a bummer, but at the same time, it was a win-win because if I didn't get that, I was about to do a new show at Second City with, Mick Napier as the director, which I was really excited about. And then it was strange. Like, I remember we were in rehearsal and someone came in and said, hey, there's a phone call for you. I was like, this is weird. And that's when I got the word that they wanted to hire me, and I had to be there in a week. And that was crazy. And so it was really cool. I mean, I had to go back in and I went, I just got a job. And everyone was super excited and happy for me, and it was cool. And I had to go pack my whole place. And I'm trying to remember if I drove out there or what I did. I can't remember if I flew out and maybe my stuff. Anyway, that's how that all went down. That's how I got that job.
And then you got a cast of Colbert and Carell, and you got, Dana Carvey and Bill Todd, and it's January of what year? 90 what?
This is January 96 is when I moved. That's when I moved to New York to start that job. They hadn't hired the cast yet. I was actually, I was watching the audition tapes with everybody, and, everyone was kind of giving their input, and, I certainly gave a lot of input as far as I'm not responsible for getting them hired, but I had worked with Colbert and Carell, and, it was cool to be able to say, yeah, these guys are two of the funniest people, blah, 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 blah. I mean, obviously, Smigel's calling Giannis and whoever. I'm sure they were calling other people, but it was cool to be part of this. I mean, it was a great writing staff, the cast obviously incredible. This woman, Heather Morgan, was the lone female cast member, and she was from the Groundlings, and so incredibly funny. I mean, it's a crazy first job out of Second City. I mean, it's pretty wild.
And McKay's already there at SNL, or he hasn't arrived yet? He's already at SNL.
No, he and Giannis got hired as a team. They were part of the writing staff of that whole new cast. 95 was when they hired that whole new cast. Keckner was part of that cast, Nancy Walls, and then Giannis and McKay got hired as writers. So they were already there. And Giannis was already there.
So you had some friends from Chicago in New York City, to, commiserate with or hang with. Yeah.
Yes.
And then the Dana Carvey show, they've done, documentaries about it, and whatnot. But after that ends, how does that take you to the next thing? Is Conan the next big thing that you get, and do you stay in New York, or do you go to LA?
I had a couple jobs before Conan. I ended up sort of, that was maybe a 4-month job. And then it's sort of, all right, now what? Am I going to go back to Chicago? And at the time, I felt like, no, I've done everything I wanted to do there. I already did a main stage show. This just felt like time to keep moving. So I decided to stay in New York, spent the summer just kind of hanging out, figuring out what's next. And there's still the whole thing for me on a personal level of, this is cool, but I want to be an actor. I'm glad to get a writing job. This is fine for now, but trying to think about how am I going to get back into acting. I got to get an agent and blah, 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 blah. But so the summer I decided to just kind of take it easy and enjoy living in New York for the first time. Didn't quite take New York by storm like I did in Chicago. But it was really fun. It was just cool to be in New York and just enjoy that. And then in the fall, when it became time, like, all right, I got to really figure out what I'm doing job-wise, another writing job came up. This was this Jenny McCarthy MTV sketch show. And the producer on that show knew Louis and asked him if he could recommend some writers, and Louis was nice enough to recommend me. I did submit to SNL because I was hoping that I could roll right into that because I had friends there and I had auditioned there, and I thought I'd have as good a shot as anyone, but I didn't get that job, which again at the time was a bummer. And, now when I look back on everything, not getting SNL as an actor and a writer is, well, is I'm glad it didn't happen because it allowed these other things to happen, which I think were better. And that's obviously hindsight. Because really, you know, Conan was the best job. That to me was the dream job, especially at the time. You know, so just to go back for a sec. So I got this Jenny McCarthy job, but I'm in New York. That job was in LA. So I ended up putting all my stuff in storage, I think, and went out there. And I have cousins who still live there now. They had just bought a house. They didn't have kids yet. And they let me stay with them for 4 months. And I just rented a car the whole time I was there and had that job. And then after that, it was, well, now what? Do I go back to New York or do I stay in LA? I think I submitted to SNL again. I can't remember. Maybe before another job came up, which was the Keenan Ivory Wayans talk show. He had this short-lived talk show. And I ended up submitting to that. And I got it. And I just felt like, well, I'll just, I guess, keep going. It's a job. It's health insurance. But then I had to move there officially. So I then had to move again a year later to L.A. full-time. I mean, even though the Jenny McCarthy job was there, I was not necessarily moved there. But this time I moved there, you know, bought a car. And I only lasted one cycle, you know. For your listeners, the way these writing jobs work on late night shows, you get hired for in cycles, usually 13 or 26 weeks. And I knew right away, I'm like, I'm not going to want to stay in this job. It was just not for me. A lot of nice people there, but just, you know, sensibility wise. So, but, you know, one of the great things about a job is I met Vernon Chapman, who's one of the members of PSFR and one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. So there were some cool people on the job, and it was overall pretty fun. Although I will say, Mr. Show was on the same lot that we were working at, and they were in the same building. And I remember Vernon and I would sometimes walk around, and we could hear them like on the other side of his door, just having a great time. It just sounded so fun, and I was pretty bummed because I was pretty friendly with Dino. But I was never considered for Mr. Show, and I always felt like that was kind of a bummer. And I think it was because, you know, when I was doing Dana Carvey, Bob Odenkirk and David Cross got hired as a writing team just to kind of come in and help. And I didn't really get along with Odenkirk just because he wasn't very friendly to me, and I didn't really, you know, I was young and intimidated, and I think because of that, because I think Dino might have mentioned my name for Mr. Show, and I think he was just like, yeah, I don't know about that guy. So that always made it even more of a bummer that I moved to LA and I'm doing this job that I don't really like, and here's this awesome show right next door, and it was a real bummer. So after LA, or after Keenan, you know, because I was only there for 13 weeks and then I quit. And it was amicable, and that's fine. But now I'm there just sort of like, well, now what? Now I'm in Los Angeles trying to figure out, well, what do you do here? How do you get going? How do you get an agent? How do you start auditioning? It's such a weird place and a weird time when we're all young and figuring it out, and we were all doing those improv shows out there, and you know, going to everyone's houses for parties, and that stuff is all awesome, but also weird because it's that whole culture that I really don't like. It's just everyone's talking about auditions and blah 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 blah. And I didn't hear about that, and it was, you know, after, you know, even from being there for a few more months, because I probably quit Keenan in September, and then the rest of that year just hanging out. You know, I'd saved money and all that, so I could just live for a while without having to worry about it, but still to figure out what was next. And then it was the following year, probably early in the year, that I had heard Conan was hiring. I think I remember being at Pete Holney's house. We were going to have dinner together. And I think you might have even called me. Oh, that was Ali. Maybe you were going to come by, and then you were working on a packet for Conan or something like that. And then I remember feeling like, oh, they're hiring? Oh, I got to work on my packet. And then I remember think I might have even left. Like I might have just had a freak out of I gotta go. I gotta go home and work on my packet. But that was the following spring, which is now we're in '98. And that was because I actually had interviewed at Conan. Now I'm forgetting that. I'm forgetting a couple steps because after Dana Carvey show, yeah, that's what it was. I submitted to SNL, I submitted to Conan, and I met with them, didn't interview, didn't get the job. And so the second time around, I did. Or maybe it was even two more rounds. Maybe I got Conan on the third try. I can't remember for sure, but I do remember interviewing with them. And then on that third time around, just getting, submitting a packet, or maybe I'd already submitted the packet. Can't remember. No, now I'm blanking. Maybe it was a new packet. I feel like it might have been a new packet. And then, however much longer later, got the call that I got hired. And so now I moved back to New York. And I've been here since. That was April '98. And I've been back in New York since then.
The backstory to that, Rich Fulcher and I were putting together a packet for Conan, and then Holney invited us to come to a barbecue. And we said, yeah, sure. And then he said, but we can't come right now. We're trying to work on this Conan packet. And I guess you were at that barbecue. And then we called, Holney called back. He's like, hey, man, I'm sorry. I told Glaser he just took off to go work on his packet. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I didn't know. I just kind of brought up like, oh, you guys weren't able to come because you're working on a Conan packet. And he literally just took off. I remember we used to laugh about that story, Fulcher and I, because it was like, Jesus, fucking Holney gave our job to Glaser, Not that we were really in the running, because we were like, trying to write as a team. We'd never done it before. We hadn't really had the credits and stuff. But we always gave Holney grief. It's like, he's like, don't tell Holney anything. He's going to cost you a job. Oh, sorry, man. So you get, you get to New York in '98 for Conan, and to me, I was lucky enough because of, Brian Stack and Mike Coleman to, play his agent and be around a little bit during that time. And it just felt like golden age of television type stuff. There were monkeys, there were people dressed up like, pharaohs, It was just, whenever I was there, I was like, this must have been what it was like to be part of golden age of television. Did you feel like that there when you got there in '98? You're working in 30 Rock, the 6th floor,
Yeah, it was, wait, I'm going to sneak going into a different room in case the acoustics are different.
Sorry. Hopefully, yeah.
What's that?
Hopefully anybody listening to this, if I figure it out, is listening for content and story, because that was one of the things where I was like, you know what, you can listen to Alan Watts and Krishnamurti, and it's just a recording, like on a tape recorder. But if you hear it and you're someone who's like, I'm interested in this, you won't care if the sound quality is not perfect.
I agree. Well, yeah, when I was at Conan, I was thrilled, even before I got hired there, because it took me a couple of rounds before I got hired. That was the dream job at the time for me, just because I felt like you get to be a writer and a performer in a way that I don't know if you can do that at SNL. I like the short form stuff. I like all the bits. And it just seemed, and especially knowing people like McCann and Stack, it just looked like so much fun. And of course it was. And yeah, so there was a genuine thrill of working at 30 Rock, of being on the show, of going to that building every day for work. It was the coolest, and it really was the best. That was, obviously an all-time highlight. It was very cool.
You're cutting out a little bit.
Oh,
you were saying all-time highlight.
Yeah, I'm just echoing what you were saying. It was very cool to have that job, and to go to actually be going to 30 Rock on a daily basis was very, very cool. That was I tried never to be cynical about that, or never have that joy wear off. Like, I'm coming into this building for work every day. It was very cool.
And you were there, I mean, for a long while.
I was there 5 years, almost to the day.
Hmm. And, when you get hired in a show like that, at SNL you get hired as a writer, and if you're lucky, maybe you get some, little places here and there where you can perform. But you're hired at Conan as a writer-performer, basically. Is that right?
I think, there's that understanding. There's no guarantee and there's no promise, but they're for sure looking to people that have the potential to do both. They were for sure known to be a place that would hire performer writers, and that was one of the great things about that job. And the writing staff was awesome. It was such a great group of people, extremely funny, everyone cool. It was such a good time. I mean, even though I was there for 5 years, I probably was burned out after a couple, and then stayed for various reasons, one of them being 9/11, where I thought, well, I'm not quitting now, and just hanging around for a little more, which turned out to be almost 2 more years or maybe even a little longer. And even then, it was still, there were certainly things about the daily grind of it that I hated, but it was still fun. Even when I quit, I knew I was done because I was just burned out. But there was elements of the job that were still so fun, and I was just sobbing when I left because I was sad to leave, even though I knew it was the right move to make. But certainly one of the most fun jobs.
What would be like an average day at Conan? You show up at what time, and how you get to the writing, and what does it look like for someone who may never get a chance will never get a chance again to know what that's like?
I mean, at the time, it was kind of getting in around somewhere between 10 and 11. There's from what I remember, no real official start time, unless I was just being negligent. But I always recall if you got in there between 10 and 11, that was usually good. And then, depending on what was going on that day, you might be working on a desk piece, or if you had a sketch that you had gotten approved the previous day or the previous week, you'd be working on that. It really just depended on what you were working on each day. You'd spend a bulk of the morning writing jokes for that day's piece, and or that the Act 3, which was more of the sketchy long form piece. And if you had written that got approved, you'd spend your day working on that. So every day was different. Some days you might have a heavy workload. Some days you might have nothing or next to nothing to work on. And that was one of the great things about that job. Is I remember talking to Dratch about that, and she said, "Don't you get worried that you'll just won't think of ideas?" And I just said, "No, we're just like that. We're the type of people that we're always just thinking of bits. And it's one of the things where, again, like I never thought of myself as a writer, and it wasn't until I got these writing jobs that I started to think of it in those terms. Even from the standpoint of, even when we're all fucking around doing bits, that's writing. When you're improvising, you're writing. It's just spontaneous writing. And so you may go back and hone it and rewrite something, but you do develop this mindset of just thinking of ideas. And that was the great thing about Conan, is you could come up with, there might be a bit like satellite TV, and you come up with this 10-second bit, and it can be one of the funniest things you've done. But because of the nature of the job, you're just constantly thinking of ideas, and they might just be extremely dumb, but you're still going to get it on because that's just what the show is, in part. It's a volume, and you sometimes don't have any other options other than to put stuff on that. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you have to try it, which is also a cool thing about the job. There's maybe in a way even less pressure than an SNL where it's just once a week. You have more opportunities to succeed and certainly more opportunities to fail, but it's all relative. Even a failure, and I'll put that in quotes because it's just, that maybe it wasn't super funny, but it was cool and weird, and we did it. And at least we tried it, as opposed to feeling like, well, we only get one shot at this a week. It's got to be good. And obviously it doesn't always work that way, but that was one thing I loved about that job.
And then when you decided it was time to leave, after that, what was the next step? Because I remember being in Los Angeles during the mid-'90s and seeing you workshop the witness protection program stand-up bit. I believe I saw you at I.O. doing that. You had the little amp and you had the, face mask, if I'm mistaken. Or maybe was it New York I saw you do that? When did that pop up as a bit that eventually became Delocated? And how did that come about?
the first time I did it was in LA. It was me and Laura Kraft and Rich Fulcher. And we were doing a show, and it was basically 3 one-person performances. And that witness protection program character was part of my show. And the original joke, which I ended up, putting in my Conan packet that we hired, that took a job away from you and Fulcher. And again, I'm sorry about that. It's cutthroat business.
We're here now, buddy. We're here now.
We're here now. We're constantly texting about coconut water.
That's right.
So that character was from that show and was in my original Conan packet, and it originally had a joke attached to it, which was a very stupid joke. It was basically the same guy, this really smug, confident asshole. But the joke was he was an impressionist, and a very, very bad, hacky impressionist as well, but who thought his stuff was really good. And he had the ego that he still wanted to get out there and put himself out there and perform. And so his solution was to wear a mask and modulate his voice so you couldn't hear what he really sounds like to protect his identity. And then the joke was that all the impressions just sounded like that voice. And so I did that character live. Might have done it in New York live. I can't remember. But when I came to Conan, that was in my pitch packet, and I got to do that on the show probably a handful of times. And after Conan, I always really wanted to do something with that character because I just thought it was so funny. I didn't want that to just be it. And so that was where I started thinking about Delocated, and eventually pitched it. I originally pitched it. I'm trying to think about. I know I pitched it in L.A. I think it was in L.A. and I pitched it at Comedy Central. Maybe I actually pitched it after. You know what? I think I pitched it in L.A. to Comedy Central first, and they passed. And then I pitched it to Adult Swim, and they said yes. So it took a while for that to actually happen.
And when Adult Swim says yes, they're saying yes to a pilot, or how many episodes are they saying to initially?
Just a pilot.
Just a pilot. And then when the pilot gets made and they like it, then how many episodes do they give you?
The first season was 6 episodes, and it was that quarter-hour format that they do. Mm-hmm. The first season was only 6 of the quarter hours plus the pilot. And then when they picked up the show, they actually were the ones that offered it to do it as a half hour. So the second 2 seasons were half-hour episodes.
And that must have been, I was lucky enough to be in season 3, but that must have been, a great opportunity to be like, this is your own show, your own idea. You get to, throw the rope down to Vernon, and bring other people from PFFR aboard. That must have been a nice chunk of time as well.
It was fantastic. It was one of those things where that's where that, the Vernon connection came back around, where they, and I had done a couple bits in their show, Wonder Shows, and they had just decided to be a production company right when I needed to hire a production company. And I had met with a few production companies and decided to hire them just because I knew Vernon, and I knew them a little bit I knew Vernon, and I knew John and Allison a little from Wonder Shows, and I just had the highest respect for them. And so it was an easy decision. And, as far as making the show, it was such a weird process in certain ways, because we made the pilot, and then it wasn't like they just immediately picked up the show for 10 episodes. It was a lot of kind of waiting to hear if they're going to pick it up. Are they going to make it again? Then it was 6 episodes. So the second season was originally just 6 episodes. And while we were editing it, that's when they said, we actually really like these. We're going to shoot. Let's have you make 6 more. And then we'll make a whole season of 12 episodes. So it wasn't like I went into it knowing I had 3 years or 4 years of work or however long it was, there was still a little bit of making the show, then having to wait and kind of waiting to get an answer, and then finding out we're going to make more, and then making those, and then shooting them. And it was no complaints. It was awesome, but it was, just sort of a long process of sometimes, being busy and then sometimes waiting. Same thing for season 3, where I'm trying to remember if we went into it knowing it was going to be 10 or if we shot 5 first. Maybe we wrote 5, shot 5, and then wrote the next 5 and shot the next 5. I can't remember for sure. But yeah, I mean, getting to make the show was just the greatest. I mean, to get to make my own show was so cool. I mean, I didn't necessarily know what I was doing at the time, which also helped to have people like Vernon and Jon that had made a show or two at the time, and we all kind of did it together, and it was awesome.
So when you get a show picked up like that by Adult Swim, then it's up to you to get a production company or pick one, and they're the ones who are going to help you make it in terms of the camera equipment, the shooting schedule, the locations. Is that what the production company does, basically?
Essentially, yeah. My understanding of a production company is they deal with all the logistics, and I could have hired a production company that was more of a, that were more just producers. I went with Jon and Vernon or PFFR, because Jon and Vernon are writers, and we ended up doing all the writing together. Allison sort of became more of the de facto main EP, but we still had to hire a main supervising producer who was Steve Ast. And so Steve's main job is to handle all the production stuff, like all the logistics, more like, the paperwork side of it, and less the creative side of it, even though he was really knowledgeable on that side and did a good job weighing in on that. But it was really me and Jon, Allison, and Vernon handled the creative side, while PFFR as a production company still handled a lot of the logistics and had Steve in place as the main supervising producer who oversees that side of things. That includes paperwork, contracts, things that I don't want to be dealing with. So that's really, I think, what you're doing when you're hiring a production company is they take care of all that stuff. That includes the hiring of people and hiring the post people and dealing with all those kinds of things. And yeah.
Well, I just remember, that season 3 that I was on, it was so fun because, I got to work with Janine, and Amy Schumer was on the show, and Mark from England, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was just such a great cast, and for me, that was another this is another fun, magical time where I get to kind of be a part of this cool thing and, basically not have to do any heavy lifting, but I get to just kind of be around it. And it was just, but again, to me, when I tell people about the Pit as craft community career, I try to tell them, look, I worked on the craft. The community part is Jon and I knew each other and we're friends. We weren't friends because I thought someday Jon will put me in something. We were just friends because we would have been friends in 7th grade in the neighborhood. And then all of a sudden, someone throws down the rope and, you get to be in something for a bit. Now, from that, after that ended. Is that
on the wall somewhere at the Pit, craft community career?
Yeah, it's one of our, it's one of our credos. What I like to say is work on the craft and your career will come. Work on the community and your career will come. But just work on your career and you'll have neither craft nor community.
Yeah.
Because, ultimately it's like it all comes down to, can you do it when they say action or places? If you can't, no one's just going to give you a job. And have you worked with people so they want to work with you? And, friends give friends jobs and then you hire other people. And, so yeah, it's a part of it. And it's just one of those things that, came to me one night late while I was just walking around the original Pit thinking, what have I got myself into? But Amy, after that, you became a writer on Amy Schumer after Delocated. That was before Neon Joe.
No, here's the way. I mean, kind of. Here's how I got the Amy Schumer job. So, once Neon Joe, so after Delocated, I made the Neon Joe pilot, and we were waiting to hear if it was going to get made. And at the time, we had the whole process of that was we made this pilot, we turned it in, and then they said, show us 3 scripts to give us a better idea of what the show is before we pick it up. And so we spent some time working on those scripts, and then they said, write one more. They gave us some notes and some feedback. We wrote one more, and they said, okay, we're going to make it. We'll do 6 episodes. So, start putting things in motion, hire your crew, etc. So we were all excited. And then it was, I can't remember what summer it was. I remember doing some writing. I mean, it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. We were actually out at Fire Island, and we were staying at Tina Fey's place. She's got this really beautiful house out there, and they weren't there for a week, and they let me and my family stay there. And they got this cool house with like a little guest cottage, and it was this really fun, almost, idyllic kind of setting where I'm with my family. We're out at Fire Island, which is already beautiful. We're staying at this nice house. I'm going to do some writing in the guest cottage. It felt like a very romanticized version of being a writer, where my family's going to go to the beach during the day, and I'm going to be in the writing cottage, and then we'll have lunch later, and blah, 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 blah. So one morning, we're having breakfast. One of my son's friends from school was out there, and they came by for breakfast. Him and his little sister and his mom, and then the mom's sister. We're just all chit-chatting, and she lives in Atlanta. And so I just, making small talk about, I'm writing for a show that, their headquarters are in Atlanta, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim. And she says, oh, my God, my friend works at CNN, and they're about to have massive layoffs. And I had heard nothing about this, as far as, any sort of budget stuff at Turner. And I didn't say it in a cocky way, but I basically said to her, oh, God, that's terrible. I'm so sorry to hear. Thankfully, Adult Swim, they're really kind of their own entity down there. And, they do really well for themselves, and that stuff never affects them. So I was basically saying to this lady, yeah, I don't got to worry about that. And they all go to the beach. I go start writing. I was probably an hour into doing some writing. I get a phone call, and it's Allison from PFFR. And she just goes, sit down. I have the worst news. and I remember thinking, I wasn't even thinking anything about the show not happening. And then she basically starts to explain how the show's on hold. There's all these budget cuts happening at Turner. CNN is laying all these people off. She starts telling me what this other lady just told me, and that all their budgets at Adult Swim are on hold. And I'm just stunned because I felt like they told us the show is happening. They told us to hire a crew. We've told people that we're doing this. I personally have turned down several auditions because I knew I couldn't take those jobs because we're going to be filming. And I wasn't worried because I thought, well, if they back out, they have to pay us. Like, I'm going to get my full season's worth of money. But because of the way they do it there, the show was not, quote unquote, officially picked up. And so they started playing all this hardball, which they had to do because of lawyers. Like, well, who told you the show's picked up? It's not approved on our end. All this crazy shit where now all of a sudden we're not making the show. And we had to go back and tell all the crew, sorry, everyone has to go find jobs now. Including me. It was so fucking shitty and upsetting, even though it was maybe, out of their hands. But that's kind of what happened. Everyone had to scramble and find work. And I remember I was doing Larry Murphy. Larry? Remember he was the doorman in Delocated?
Mm-hmm.
He was living in Fort Greene at the time and doing a comedy show with this guy, Greg Johnson, at this bar. And I was there one night doing the show, and Jessie Klein, who was a comedian and a writer, and she was the original head writer, she was the head writer on Amy Schumer's show. They were staffing up for their 3rd season. And she was doing stand-up on this show. We're old friends. We go way back, and we were just chit-chatting. And she's like, how's it going? How's your Neon Joe show coming along? And I told her what happened. And then that was it, and I go home, after doing the show. And she basically, when she heard that, they were still hiring some writers, and she mentioned it to Amy and said, do you think should we offer him a job? Would he even do it? And, of course, I'm like, yeah, thank you. I needed a job. And so that's how I ended up writing on Amy's show. And it was just, such a stroke of luck for me. It was just great timing. And, they couldn't have been, it was such a good opportunity for me, honestly, because it was, number one, a job, and it was with friends. And they couldn't have been nicer about it. They were just saying, we'll let you, if you have auditions, you can go do those. We'll be super flexible with your schedule. I mean, it was about as ideal as it could have been, especially in that moment. And so it just turned into this great experience of having this really fun writing job. I got to perform every now and then. They were flexible with my schedule, which I didn't even need to be because nothing else really came up. And that was so much fun. That was cool.
But you'd put Amy into Delocated, so you were one of the first people who gave Amy Schumer like a job doing sketch comedy and acting, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah, she was, I think, an up-and-coming stand-up. I didn't know her at all when she auditioned for Delocated. I just thought she was hilarious in her audition. Super funny, really subtle, and we hired her, and we gave her that job, and that obviously, I'm sure, helped her with all of. I mean, I always joke around with her that she owes it all to me. She clearly doesn't, but yeah. So that was also part of it. Is just that we became friends, and she gave me a job when I really needed it, and I was very thankful.
And so then after the Amy Schumer show, Neon Joe gets picked up to do a season.
Yes. Then we come back. Thankfully, it happened the following year. Because the Schumer writing job was through the rest of that fall. And then I can't remember. I think we must have started writing Neon Joe in the winter, and then we shot it in the summer of the following year.
And then for something like that, you got a chance to put in Adsit was in that as well?
Adsit was in that.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anyone else that I really knew. Not really. He was the only person that I really knew that from way back that was in the show. Everyone else we just had auditioned, I believe.
And where does an idea like Neon Joe, Werewolf Hunter come from? I mean, like, what's the moment of genesis where all of a sudden it's like this idea comes and then it becomes more than just maybe a sketch, but a show? Well,
that particular idea came from when I was done with Delocated. I went on to do Jimmy Fallon's show to promote the series finale of Delocated, and I just decided to do something to amuse myself for the segment, rather than just go on and just, here's the show, here's a clip, and that's that. So I had a couple of articles of clothing at home that I had used in these random comedy bits. One was a pair of Coors Light sweatpants, and one was this neon yellow hoodie and a neon knit cap. And so I went on Fallon and I just basically made up a show. There was literally nothing. And I said, well, I'm really sad about Delocated being done, but I'm excited for my next project. It's called Neon Joe, Werewolf Hunter. All we have right now is a costume, which I'm wearing. And we'll figure out the rest, but it's about a guy that wears neon clothes and hunts werewolves. And again, this was a total 100% arbitrary made-up joke. And I remember at the time thinking, Adult Swim, I'm sure, is going to watch this interview because it's for Delocated. And I could see them saying, we know that's a joke, but it sounds like a show we'd make. And that's basically what happened, where they saw it and they said, certainly taking a leap of faith because I had worked with them already, but they just allowed me to write a pilot. They said, well, why don't you just write a script? Let's see if there's anything there. And so I just started from scratch. And, besides Adsit, of course, Steve Service, who was in Delocated. Adsit and I obviously go way, way back. But so it was, coming up with the script idea from nothing and trying to figure out, well, what could this actually be? What could this possibly be? And that's how that show came about. It's really one of my absolute favorite things about making that show is it just came from this dumb joke. And then we had to make some adjustments and notes and all that. And, that wasn't the actual outfit. And it obviously looked much cooler than it was on the show, the talk show. But that's where Neon Joe came from. It was not like, it wasn't a passion project. It's not like I always wanted to make a horror genre parody or anything. It was just almost a challenge.
Wow.
It was a fun one.
Yeah. And then from there, gear. Jon Glaser loves gear. How did that come about, where that was the next thing you did with Adult Swim?
Well, Gear was True TV. Gear was not Adult
True
Swim.
TV, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right. But Gear was, again, like a very, when I was kind of trying to think about what's next, what are other ideas, it was a very, very loose idea that I had. It was not a fully formed thing at all. But I'd put together some kind of packet about what it could be and what I'd envisioned it. I actually originally envisioned that as not even a comedy show, not even pitching it to comedy networks. I thought that might be a little more of the non-comedy version of it, which is just me genuinely checking out gear and nerding out about gear and going to companies like North Face and Patagonia or wherever, just looking at their new products and testing them out and trying stuff and enjoying the gear aspect of it, and then maybe coming up with comedy ideas as, an afterthought, or maybe as a, later in the show, coming up with a sketch or whatever. And then, so I never even considered pitching it to comedy networks, and True TV at the time was kind of rebranding themselves and trying to do more comedy-based stuff that were still in the reality world. And so they really responded to the idea, even though it was very, very loose. And I really liked the woman who I pitched it to, this woman named Angel Anasek, who was at the time one of the main development VPs there, or whatever her official title was. But she's the woman I pitched it to, and I just liked her a lot. She totally got it. She got what it could be. She's just really cool. There was also a guy named Rich Corson, who was an old Daily Show guy that I knew a bit, who I liked and has good taste, and he had an independent deal with him as an outside producer. And so I thought, I guess this is a little bit of a gamble here because I don't know this network and they're pretty small, but why not? Like, it almost felt like if you build it, they will come kind of a thing, where it doesn't matter where you make a show. If your fans know it, they'll come, they'll watch it. And so, it eventually became heavily scripted to the point that I probably would have pitched it somewhere else. If that was the original idea, maybe a more scripted network that has a little more exposure to them, but at the same time, no real regrets, because I got to make 2 seasons of the show, and they were very supportive creatively, and I was happy with how it turned out. So that's pretty much how that came about.
And then something like Parks and Rec, that comes about because of Amy and ASCAT and such.
I don't even know if I ever fully got the idea of how I got Parks and Rec. I mean, I knew Amy, I knew Mike Schur a little bit from New York and SNL, just from crossing paths. But I think the story that I had heard was that they had this character and just thought of me. That was a job that I got offered. I didn't have to audition.
Wow.
And it was very, very cool to have something like that happen. I don't know if they offered it to anyone else first and I was a second choice, or if I was the first choice, or what. But I was always under the impression that they kind of thought of me for it, which was just a stroke of luck, that you're thought of for something like that turned out to be such a fun role on a great show with friends. I mean, certainly another just one of these great jobs that I got lucky to get. Man, it was fun as hell. But that's, I think, how that one came out. And I'm not even sure if they had these bigger plans of how big of a character it would be. And I got lucky that I got to do maybe a handful of episodes each year, and they'd fly me out and put me up. And the fact that this one-off episode was on last night, I'm not sure if you knew about it. They did a special one-off episode last night, and they had everyone film it at home, because everyone's quarantined. They sent iPhones to everybody, and everyone filmed it at home, and they wrote this script based around that. And even just to get to be a part of that was cool. And man, that was I miss all this stuff. I miss all the filming days and shooting with your friends, and who knows what that's going to be like now. But anyway.
But a character like that is like right in your wheelhouse. That's just right down the middle for you to knock out of the park, and it's a testament to them to just be like, this is Jon Glaser. Something like Laird from Girls, is that something where you're auditioning for it, or they just reach out to you?
That was an audition. That was just a straight up audition where I know, the casting director I know, and she thought of me. I mean, they auditioned plenty of people, of course, but I didn't know any of them, and that was just the good fortune to actually get an audition, which, that usually doesn't happen. So that's how I got that job. It was actually, the original character was more of a, not suburban, but more of like a, just a New York brownstone dad who happened to sell weed. And then that's actually what I auditioned for. And then after I got the job is when they told me, we're actually changing it. You're going to be a former junkie. I was like, great. And when they actually described the character with this, they described it as wearing a knit cap. The hat that I wore in Girls was actually mine. I own that hat. And that was actually my dad's hat.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember just suggesting to him, I said, I actually have a hat that I think would be perfect. I sent him a photo, and they said, love it, done. And
wow.
That was always a very fun, cool thing, even for my dad. Always enjoyed that.
And Curb Your Enthusiasm, audition or straight out offer?
Audition. I didn't know Jeff Garland too well in Chicago, really hardly at all. But yeah, they just did the big run of New York auditions, and same thing. I don't know if that was the part I auditioned for. I think it might have been, but yeah, that was just audition. Got lucky to get it.
And yesterday I spoke to Richard Kind for a couple of hours, and he was talking about how the show is done and the freedom you get inside the scenarios to just improvise. And that must have been fun to just improvise, with that level of talent.
Oh, yeah. It was awesome. Very, very fun. Yeah, to get to do the scene with Larry was really cool. Having Jeff on set and having a friendly, familiar face was really cool. Everyone was nice. All the writers, there was, David Mandel and Alec Berg. David went on to helm Veep, and Alec Berg, I hate that I just said helm. Alec Berg was doing Silicon Valley, and then this other guy, what was his name, Jeff? Oh, man, he ended up doing that show, The League. But just super nice guys, all really funny. It just made it very easy to go on to set where you don't know anyone, and everyone's just super nice, and they make it really fun.
I mean, like I said, when I decide, like, looking at my phone, I see your name, let me see if Jon wants to talk to me. I've never looked you up before, but I'm like, let me look up Wikipedia so we'll have some talking points. And it's amazing, like, the pedigree, like, the Second City, the Dana Carvey Show, Conan O'Brien, all the things you've done, it's pretty prolific. And I mean, like I said, I just know you as my friend Jon Glaser, and obviously I was on Delocated. But what what does your ideal world look like next after this virus and whatever the world is going to be? Because honestly, if anybody says they know, they're lying to you, because nobody has any idea what this new world will look like once we're allowed to be around each other. What would you, for yourself, mean ideally?
Yeah, I don't know. I have certainly given a lot of thought. It's funny, even this whole thing, I've had this conversation with several people, including especially Steve Service. He and I text and talk a lot. And even in general, we do. He's become just a good friend. As far as what's next, I don't know, man. It's stressful because for everything I've done, and I've been so lucky with everything I've gotten to do from a work standpoint, but I've spent so much time, and I'll just preface this by saying, and I think you and I might have had this conversation once or twice along these lines about, when I think about right now, from a regret standpoint about the things that I never did, and I certainly am aware of how lucky I am for all the things I've gotten to do. There's always, for me at least, And I know it's an absolute complete waste of time to do this, thinking about, oh man, I was so lucky with so much work and I wasn't able to turn that into more of, I never bought a place and I never bought a car and I didn't invest my money to make it grow and like things like that, which are such a waste of time to dwell on. But that's what I found myself thinking about a lot now because I feel like, well, shit, it seems like, so I seem like I should be someone that just, has a sweet house and whatever. I know, I know what I'm saying, and I'm like, what a waste of time because I'm very lucky and I have a fine apartment and all that, but I wish I was sitting on a huge pile of money right now, where I wouldn't have to worry so much about what's next. And I know this is maybe getting too personal, but that's been on my mind lately about what's next, which is, I don't know, but I got to figure it out, and I don't know, even verbalizing it, I already feel like, I shouldn't even have brought this up, but I don't know, because it's a weird, scary thing to think about. I guess I'm just thinking about what can I write? I imagine things are going to be mostly animated from here. I don't see how productions are going to film. What are people going to do at home? There was this Parks and Rec special that we made. I've already been hearing things from friends about auditions or things like, what kind of camera do you have? What are the backdrops you can use? How are people going to film at home? I'm sure things are going to get figured out and people will eventually figure out how to get back to work on a film set, but that might not be for a year or two. So I don't know, man. I hate that I even just brought up all the money shit because who cares? That's no one's business. But and I'm usually very private and I don't like talking about that stuff. But that is also, I've been trying just for myself, just not worry about that. And if that's what I want to talk about, just talk about it. No one should feel bad for me by any means, but I don't know, man.
But I think it's important to, monsters live in the dark. So I think it's important to give voice to our, what is it that I'm afraid of? And I'm definitely in the same boat as you in terms of wow, I put all my eggs in this, improv comedy theater school thing. And I've loved doing it. I mean, I feel profoundly grateful and blessed that, I've been 18 years I've been able to do this thing, but I don't know what the future will hold because of landlords and will people come back? Will they have money? Will you have to be able to have half as many people in a space? So I totally get that. I guess I was more thinking in terms of if you could wave a magic wand and all of a sudden, it's is it your own show? They're picking you up. You're in New York City. It's shot in Brooklyn. I mean, I know how much you love sandwiches,
No, it's funny. I mean, even when you said what I meant was I know what you meant, and then I still went off on that tangent because I'm just so focused on that right now. It's terrible. And I've had this conversation even just earlier today. Jody Lennon and I were texting, and even she's saying the same thing. Just cut yourself a break. And I know I should, and I can't think about that stuff. So anyway, I'll stop talking about that. And if I could wave a magic wand, I don't know. If I could do anything next, I don't know, man. That's also, it'd be cool, I guess, to write some kind of animated show. I mean, there was certainly some things, that I had just been pitching some things, and we were getting ready to take them out, and I was working on some ideas that we were getting ready to pitch, and those are obviously all the pitches are even on hold or they're slowed down, and even if we were to pitch them, can they even be made now? And I don't know, man. I mean, it'd be nice to think of something where, whether it's a book or a show I can just write, maybe even a podcast. I had some old podcast idea that was a little more of a back burner idea, and maybe that'll come to the forefront as far as, well, here's something I can do at home where I can literally just record something, and maybe that's the future. Is just podcasting and animated shows where people can literally just write at home, and animators can work from home, and then you just do these Zoom meetings for notes. And I don't know, it's I hope there's a way where shows can happen because it's so much fun. Like we were talking about with Delocated. I mean, what a great time that was, just working with your friends and being together. It's just, it's really weird to think about. I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, just like when the first time I saw you in Chicago, I thought this guy's got the skills to pay the bills. Now I also think you've got the adult skills to pay the adult bills. You know, you've made shows. You know how to make shows. You know how to write. You've got a writing process. You know, whatever you had in the world of athletics, I think translated to this business. You know, the work ethic and the drive and the hustle and the grind. You know, it's a testament, to like, even when I think about it, I laugh now of like just Pete Holmes putting the stakes on and you being like, bye, and like that cartoon image of like just dust, like from Bugs Bunny, and just being like, but one of the things about this phone conversation is I always try to like towards the end be like, well, let me think if I can think of some kind of win-win idea for the person I'm talking to that it's like no skin off my nose. And the idea that came to me while we were talking is an animated show called the Just Kidding Tour, of that period of time where you and your friends got that van and just toured around the country doing sketch comedy for people. I mean, I think that's a very cool story. When I hear it, it speaks to like the exuberance of novices of being like, let's do this. Why not? And calling the financial aid department and using that as a way to track down like who books these things. But I mean, almost like a Scooby-Doo thing. It's a van, but I don't know. Just Kidding Tour. To me,
they do comedy and hunt ghosts.
Sure. I mean, who doesn't like hunting ghosts while doing comedy around the country? Going to different places, shows for different numbers of people. Each episode is a different town, a different, journey. But anytime you want to write or work on the cocoa wars, I'm happy to do that with you. The coconut water wars. But every time I see the coconut water anywhere or anything that has coconut related, I'm like, should I send a picture to John, or am I bothering him? And I'm like, and if it's something cool, then I'm like, no, this I got to send him a picture of. This is definitely. And I'm always, whenever I get like one of your texts of like that fake world that we've created in the coconut water world, I'm always like, oh yeah. It's just like I feel like a former tennis player when you've like put the ball in my court, and I'm like, can I live up to John's level of funny and talent, write something back that he might get a kick out of?
Please, always. Man. I mean, well, you're at that level, in my opinion.
Well, I feel like I've been lucky enough to kind of like, I can call Jon Glaser. I'm talking to Rachel, Dratch next week, and I talked to Michael Shannon today. I feel like I'm at that level where I'm in the hallways where things happen, and maybe some point down the line something will happen where there'll be a role in my wheelhouse I'll get to do. But I just feel so unbelievably lucky that I get to pick up a phone and call and talk to Jon Glaser on a Friday afternoon, which is the best afternoon of the week, for a chunk of time. So,
but even I feel like maybe this is the conversation we've had. Not that I want to start going back to all my regrets that I'm just focused on right now, but from the maybe it's always the outsider's perspective that helps. Even when I was like, because from my perspective, I feel like you seem like a huge success to me, where you have this theater that you made and that you ran and are continuing to run, even though it's hard right now. And that just seems so cool. And just the drive and the idea and the motivation to do stuff like that, where I feel like I wish I had that kind of drive and motivation, because maybe I wouldn't be having all these regrets right now about, I should have invested my money differently, and maybe I'd be sitting on more, and I shouldn't have been so chicken shit to just go for it. You know what I'm saying? Even though I know, and I'm fully aware that going down that road of woulda, shoulda, coulda is a huge waste of time, and yet I still do it, which is stupid. But that's and I feel like maybe everyone spends time doing that, feeling like inadequate in certain ways, while everyone else is thinking, but you've done this and this and this, and then the other person goes, yeah, I know, but anyway.
Well,
my point is more that you are there, like you're a success and a supremely funny guy to me.
Thank you. That means a lot, But I think it's important not that when those thoughts come, it's like sometimes you got to look at English as a second language, and with a phrase like "don't entertain that thought," and if you translated that to somebody who speaks a different language and they would translate it, the idea of bringing a thought into your house and entertaining it. Let me make you some tea. Let me get you some peanuts. Let me get you something to eat. It's like there's nothing wrong with having that first thought. You can't control that. That comes from wherever, the lizard brain. But I think the onus of responsibility is on us not to entertain it.
Of course. And I've had,
just don't entertain it. It's like a burning ember from a fire. You're sitting around a campfire, lands on your lap. You just brush it off. You don't sit there and watch it burn through your sweet cargo pants. You're not going to ruin a pair of cargo shorts with this ember. You're just going to brush it off.
That's what I need for the rest of my life. The rest of my life are cargo pants. I gotta take care of them.
That's right. And when a burning ember, which is like a thought, a divisive thought, comes into your mind about, I should have done this, I could have done that, you do one or two things. You brush it off, or you think of three other things to use mental martial arts to disarm the thought and make it tap out. Well, if I'd done that, then I wouldn't have been able to do this, that, or the other.
Well, that's the thing that keeps from spiraling too out of control. It's like, well, if my wife and I bought an apartment when we first moved in together, then that changes the whole way my life unfolds from that point on. Meaning she doesn't get pregnant when she does, and we don't have our son.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff that keeps me from going too crazy with regret and stress, even though I'll still indulge it every now and then. But I'm willing to hold on tightly to the cargo pants. Like, my daughter is the left pocket, my son is the right cargo pocket, my wife is the button that holds it all together, and I just got to keep these pants clean.
That's right. And you got to just sitting around a fire, enjoying it, making some marshmallows, and then an ember just pops out and it lands on your cargo pants. Are you going to sit there and watch it burn through your sweet cargo pants? You're going to brush it off.
Probably going to need something different. It can't be an ember from the fire, because we made s'mores last night on the stove. Because you can't go. I guess you could go camping, get some social distance with camping.
But look, you can't. You've got an incredible lineage, skill set, tools, a toolbox, a community, people who they're there, and it's just for all of us figuring out what does this AC world look like after Corona, and how do we live in this AC world? I don't know. But
craft, community, career, Corona.
That's it. That's right. Craft, community, career makes Corona tap out. Because ultimately, you can't. I mean, it's like the movie Back to the Future. It's like that photograph fading in time. You change one bit of the fabric of time, and you're right. All of a sudden, there's no kids in the background talking. It's like the movie It's a Wonderful Life. You got to sometimes look at your life and go, well, if I hadn't, then what about all these other people who wouldn't have gotten jobs because I got them and I did this for them and this, that, or the other.
100% true.
Johnny G, I could talk to you all afternoon, but I hear the kids in the background. I just want to say thank you, man. I'm a fan and a friend, and I feel so unbelievably lucky that I can text you about having a phone call, podcast, whatever this is, and you're like, yeah, let's do it, and then we talked for a chunk of time. So thank you, and thank you for the gig you've given me, and all the gigs you've given other people. I hope in the AC world we'll be able to meet up again and get a sweet sandwich, take a walk, ride a bike, do something, check out some gear, and maybe make some content in the new world. But feel free to text me anytime you see anything coconut water or coconut related.
Well, we just added a bunch of C's. It's we've got craft, community, career, Corona. Content, coconut, just keeps going and going and going.
Just keep going, man. Just keep going. That's all you got to do. Just keep going do the best you can for as long as you can. Frozen rope from third to first. That's it. Boom. Just get down, block that ball with your body. Make sure you're wearing a cup so you don't get in your head, and then boom. See your target. Take a second.
one thing before we go, because I should go too. But like one of my fond memories that I've thought a lot about lately was just, I don't know if you remember this, was after some improv Olympic shows, me, you, McKay, and Homie, little guys versus big guys playing, I think Homie had a hoop in his alley. Remember that? It was like 2 a.m.
Of course, man. Of course, and we took them.
No, it was me and Homie versus you guys.
Oh, right. Why did I think you and I were on the same team?
Maybe we did.
But yes, I totally remember that. That was like one of those, and we're like, got a buzz on, we're like sweating, but we all at some point basketball had arrived in our lives before improv. So like whatever we were as improvisers was like gone, and now we were just outdoor basketball players.
God, it was the best. It was so fun.
I mean, I feel lucky when I think of, and something like that is like, I haven't thought about that in I don't know how long, and I just remember that fun, probably Friday or Saturday night, having done shows at I.O., probably 2, one at 8 and 10, and then just going to one of those I.O. parties, and then all of a sudden someone's like, there's a basketball goal, and then we just hooped it up.
Oh, so good.
All right, my man. Thank you, Jon. I appreciate it so much. I love you, brother. Take care. Stay strong. Text and call anytime.
And vice versa, please.
All right. Will do, brother. Take care.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Wow. Jon Glaser. I mean, you heard it. I mean, the amount of stuff he's done, Improv Olympic, Corky's Callback, which he didn't mention. He was on the team with Jon Favreau and E.J. Peters and Pete Hulme, you know, a great team in their own right. Second City, and the Joyce Sloan story brought back such memories for me because Joyce was such an integral part of my Second City experience. She was an advocate of mine, and she went to bat for me and probably kept me from getting fired the first time they wanted to fire me. And then, you know, I remember Pinata Full of Bees and what that show meant to us, and seeing that, oh, wow, we don't have to do it in this format. And seeing your friends first succeed, you know, seeing someone like McKay get hired for Saturday Night Live, and Giannis is the one who put me into Blue Co. He went to bat for me and got me hired, was my first director, Tom Giannis, in Blue Company at Second City. And then for him to be one of the writers on the Dana Carvey show, I mean, that's like comedy history, a show like that with all that talent, and then, you know, too funny to fail. Like I said, unbelievably grateful to be able to talk to Jon Glaser for that chunk of time. If you get a chance, check out the Pit's website, thepit-nyc.com, for online classes, and hopefully someday classes in the real world again. Yeah, and also Fresca. I don't know why, but I've been digging Fresca. Again, I don't make any money off Fresca yet, but I'd love to work with Fresca. So I will bid you adieu if you're still listening. I can't imagine anybody still listening, but if maybe one person is, then I will say good night, sweet dreams, or good morning, good afternoon. I hope you're healthy. If you're not healthy, I hope you get healthy. And then once you get healthy, I hope you stay healthy and appreciate your health. So until we meet again, I bid you adieu. So long and happy trails.
Thanks for listening to Global Comedy Studios. Is this a bad time to talk? Stay tuned for more.